I've played Elden Ring for about 330 hours now, between the network test in November 2021 and 7 unique cycles with the final game since its launch on February 25th, 2022. I've played as a dynamic, spell-slinging sorcerer, as a swift, counter-attacking samurai, a bloodthirsty and bonk-obsessed prisoner, and also as a pure, faith-focused prophet. I've studied and managed to no-hit a number of the game's toughest bosses, but I've also made sure to stop and smell each and every golden sunflower along the way too. I've played as optimized and as uneconomically as you can imagine. It's an impossible task, I know, but I have attempted to truly digest every element of this game, from its level design to its combat gameplay to its intriguing lore and storytelling. Now, the internet is already oversaturated with Elden Ring related content, and that's fine. That's good, actually. It's a symptom of the game's insane success. Success I couldn't have fathomed, but is certainly long deserved for Hidetaka Miyazaki and his team. Regardless, it's not my style to rush things. I really wanted to let this game marinate for a few hundred hours before I attempted to get my head above the recency bias I've been drowning in and offer any coherent thoughts about the experience as a whole. But I certainly cannot do so in one video essay or a single podcast episode, which is why this discussion and future discussions, as Morgott says, are all of a piece. Moving forward, I'm going to dissect this incredible game bit by bit, and you can expect videos on weapons, bosses, music, specific dungeons, and more. But where to start? Well, I thought about making my channel a little more in vogue and doing a video about how to break the game with blood. How to pwn PvP noobs and in turn feel better about your own feeble existence. Alternatively, I was debating whether or not to do an unfathomably deep intellectual lore video in which I'd recite in a dramatic voice my darkest ruminations about the most complicated item in all of Elden Ring. You guessed it, the gold-tinged excrement. Whose true secrets elude even the most mindful of players. I was even considering a rumor video, I understand those are pretty hot these days, in which I'd tell you how I know for a fact that Elden Ring 2, Bloodborne 2, and even Dark Souls 2 will be releasing very soon. But ultimately, I decided to stay on brand and start off with a high-level overview of why I believe, as a longtime skeptic of open-world game design, that FromSoft actually perfected the formula, or at least came as close to perfect as I've ever seen, where the open design isn't merely a novelty or worse, a product of laziness or imitation, but instead, it's actually fun, functional, and empowering for players, a natural extension of Miyazaki's previous work. But first, 3 quick housekeeping items. Number 1, I'm assuming by watching this video, you finished the game, because yes, there's spoilers, lots of them. Number 2, feel free to follow the invite link down in the description to hang out and talk gaming with me and my very chill Discord server crew over at Terapop's Treehouse. And number 3, if you'd like to further support what I do and receive bonus content from me each and every month, like my newsletter and additional podcast episodes, check out my membership tiers over at patreon.com/Terapop. That link is also down in the description. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. Whenever I finish a great novel, my instinct is to go back to the very first chapter, the first page, the first couple of sentences. I find in hindsight they carry more weight and even new meaning, and I often feel that same instinct with great video games too, especially with From Software and Hidetaka Miyazaki's games. So I did just that. After hitting the credits in Elden Ring for the first time, I hopped into New Game Plus, rode the lift back up from the stranded graveyard, and as I stepped out into Limgrave again with fresh eyes, I pulled out my trusty telescope. And it occurred to me that everything was there, unhidden, just as it was in the opening minutes of my first playthrough. The forge in the mountaintops of giants, the unburned Erd Tree, Stormvale Castle, the Chapel of Anticipation where I had unknowingly just been. In a game with so many secrets, ironically at the same time it feels like everything was right in front of us all along. Even the game's opening cinematic, the first images we see are of Marika and Radagon, two sides of the same coin, one attempting to shatter the Elden Ring, the other attempting to mend it, just like we saw in the game's initial 2019 trailer. This boldness, if you will, extends to many parts of the game, namely the teleporter trap chests. From Software fans have learned to approach chests cautiously thanks to Dark Souls mimics. You think you're about to receive a reward, but instead the chest comes to life and turns into a fanged monster. A reminder of Miyazaki's sadistic taste for the unexpected. This element of surprise is present in Elden Ring too, but instead of being eaten by a chest you are attempting to open, you're flung across the game's massive map. This is interesting for a few reasons. There's an obvious wow factor when you open the map and realize, okay, I'm all the way over here now. I didn't even know the game world was this big. Also, you're lost and likely underleveled. It's a new puzzle you suddenly have to solve. But most importantly, just like the telescope perspective, these moments show us that Miyazaki and his team were not precious about map fog and gating off the player behind invisible walls, destroyed bridges, and other open world tropes. Those are almost entirely absent here. From the very beginning of a new cycle, it's shocking how far you can go in such a short period of time. This map is only as mysterious as you allow it to be. Every square inch was in fact designed with you in mind. It's there for your sake, for your curiosity, for your sense of adventure. Unlike so many open world games, when you see a structure in the distance in Elden Ring, it's not just there for the vibes. A church on the hill, for example, in the Lands Between, is not just a church on a hill. These points of interest are designed to catch your eye, to lure you in, and offer you something, a serious challenge, a simple reward. Everything is there for a reason. Even the ornate ruins strewn about the world, they're littered with glowing ruin fragments, and if you stop and read these items' flavor text, you learn that the ruins themselves, which you've been running and hopping and galloping over for hours, are believed to have once been part of a temple in the sky. Even here, FromSoft is deepening your understanding of this world. They're piquing your curiosity. They're giving you a puzzle piece to do with what you will, because you don't have to stop and read the flavor text at all. That's just the thing. That's the beauty of it. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do in this giant playground. Summon your instant horse and gallop off in any direction. If you want to just sprint toward the game's mandatory bosses with only a club and a loincloth, go for it. Nothing is stopping you. Not only is this world beautifully realized through a bright and striking color palette, through distinct, vertically oriented zones that call to mind the best art direction from previous games, zones that invoke the spirit of a true Tolkien-esque adventure, but this world offers more density than ever before. As gigantic as the map is, it was designed very economically. Every cave, castle, catacombs, or random ruins you come across in the open fields holds something worth your while. Maybe it's a weapon, a talisman, an ash of war. The bottom line is that everything is valuable in Elden Ring. From the most basic battle axe you pick up early in your playthrough to harder to obtain boss-related items, everything is useful. Are there more and less optimized ways to play? Of course, but there's also not a wrong way to play this game. And at any point, if you want to respect your attributes or swap weapon skills or affinities, you have the power to do so. You're encouraged to do so. But because the experience, like all FromSoft games, is inherently challenging, you're actually motivated to enter dungeons and explore every inch of the fields because you'll ultimately be rewarded. It's always worth your time. Items you find will make the game easier, for lack of a better term. And this temptation to constantly explore is fundamentally tied to the game's true learning curve. I discussed this idea in my Dark Souls 10th anniversary video, but I've believed leveling up in Soulsborne games is more or less an illusion. Like sure, you can literally raise your attributes and on paper become more powerful and less likely to fail during combat encounters and boss battles. But the real leveling in these games, Elden Ring included, doesn't happen on the stat sheet or with your player avatar. It happens within you, the player, the person. Because you're rewarded every time you ride across the open fields or delve into a new dungeon, you're driven to continue doing so, which in turn means more runes and more levels. It's a simple equation. But what you're really doing is gaining experience. You, the player, are coming to better understand the game itself. And these intangibles are what truly help you defeat bosses and overcome challenges, not the fact that you have a certain number of points invested in vigor or strength. And that's Miyazaki game design in a nutshell. By tempting you with treasures, you'll play the game, defeat enemies, level up, and feel fulfilled by gradually overcoming increasingly difficult scenarios. But the fulfillment is internal. It lives within the player themselves, and it has little to do with specific bosses, weapons, or stat allocations or anything like that. These are just vehicles through which Miyazaki hopes you'll reach these profound moments of gratification. It's less about what's on the screen and more about what's happening inside your heart, your gut, your mind. But don't get me wrong, Elden Ring is all about the little nitty-gritty details too, like how satisfying it feels to swing a big bonk stick or to platform and puzzle solve. FromSoft has always nailed feel, unlike so many other developers, and that's their real secret sauce in my opinion, because all of this stuff on paper sounds great, right? Miyazaki's philosophies, the bold art direction, the economic world design, the challenging boss battles, the enthralling soundtrack, but if the game doesn't feel good, controller in hand, then what's the point? That's at least the way I see it, and it's also why so few Souls-likes click with me. There's a lot of intriguing games out there of all genres, games with great ingredients, but if I don't like the way a game feels, if it's not fluid and fun for me, then I usually can't stick with it, with very few exceptions. As I've said many times before, I do prefer smartly curated linear design. Linear is often thought of as a bad word when it comes to video games, but not to me. On the contrary, actually. When I hear open world, admittedly, I typically think of laziness. And when I hear linear design, I often think of thoughtfulness. But there's good and poor examples of both, and the open world games that resonate most with me are simulators, for lack of a better term. Red Dead Redemption 2 is the ultimate Wild West simulator. Ghost of Tsushima is the ultimate samurai simulator. Cyberpunk 2077 is the ultimate Blade Runner simulator. I gravitate to these games less for their minute-to-minute gameplay, and more for the emotional and artistic experiences they offer overall. I don't play Red Dead 2 because the gunplay is super tight. I play it because I just want to be in that world. I want to ride my horse through the fields, listening to the wind, watching a storm blow over the mountains beyond. Same with Cyberpunk. For me, it's about that first-person point of view, the wet, neon streets, the sounds, the cars, the clothes, the wonderfully overwhelming nature of it all. Tsushima's gameplay is a bit stronger compared to most open world games, sure, but again, it's less about that for me and more about galloping through a field of pampas grass with a big straw hat on my head and a sheathed katana at my hip. I do enjoy those kinds of experiences and absolutely believe they have their time and place, but never did I expect even From Software could create a giant, clever, immersive open world, but with that best-in-class gameplay that has made them my favorite video game studio ever since I first picked up Dark Souls back in late 2011. Is Elden Ring truly a perfect game though? No, of course not, and there are some aspects of the game that I don't love. But for me, no developer of an open world experience has ever married inspired art direction with deep, nuanced, skill-based gameplay, like From Software just did with their latest and, in my opinion, greatest game. Magic, melee, jumping, dodging, parrying, weapon skills, guard counters, stamina management, Ashes of War, R1 quick attacks, R2 charged attacks, over 300 unique weapons in total, having these tools, options, and mechanics at your disposal while navigating and platforming across complex legacy dungeons full of fast, challenging enemies and bosses, all within a giant, seamless fantasy overworld. It's hard to imagine a cooler video game than that. Be sure to head down to the comments and tell me what resonated most with you about From Software's take on open world design. It's always fun to keep the conversation going and hear your thoughts on our topic du jour. And remember, you have an open invitation to join and hang in my Discord server, Terapop's Treehouse, and that you can also unlock more content and perks from me every month by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Terapop. All of the links you need are down in the description. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.